moving on, is there a global run scoring crisis? So when looking up numbers for this series, it did strike me how few batters from either side are anywhere near their best form. So of the Aussies, only Marsh and Khawaja averaged more than 40 in this World Test Championship cycle. But more generally, run scoring has fallen not necessarily off a cliff, but I'd say at the very least off a mound in the last few years. So from 2018 to 2024, so January the 1st, 2018, Kane Williamson is the only player in the world with a significant sample size to average more than 50. He actually averages over 60 in that period. Root is just below 50. Smith just below as well. If you go back to the 7 years before that, 2011 to 2017, there were 12 players who averaged more than 50. From 2000 to 2017, it was normal for the average runs per wicket in a year to be between 31 to 35. It's now more like 27 to 31. 2024 is the year with the lowest average bowling strike rate since 1907. It's 48 balls per wicket in 2024. So if there's no rain, the average test this year lasts pretty much exactly 3.5 days. And the 5 years with the lowest bowling strike rates since 1922 have all taken place since 2018. But you watch a lot of cricket around the world. You talk to a lot of ex-pros, current pros. What do you think is behind this? Is there a simple answer? Is it techniques? Is it the way people are playing? Is it the World Test Championship? Are bowlers more skillful? What do you think?
All of the above, actually. There are an enormous amount of variables that go into all of this. I think the amount of Test matches finishing within 5 days is a huge factor. Why are they finishing within 5 days? Well, risk has been much in the last, at least in the last 4 years anyway, has been embraced to a level that I don't think has been seen in Test match cricket since the gentlemen were playing it. The idea that has been borne out has been sort of chiseled in stone from Ben Stokes in terms of draws. We're not interested in draws. Okay, that hasn't been everybody's mantra, at least definitely not since 2018. But I think what we're seeing on that score is teams being much more willing to kind of put the foot down to score at much elevated rates, which of course increases risks, which also means that results are much more likely. There was a massive sea change in Indian cricket. Going back to Joe Root's double 100 in Chennai back in 2020, whereby at home India decided, instead of playing on their traditionally sort of slow turners, flat pitches where their batsmen dip their bread, they went through a 2 or 3 year cycle where guys like Kohli and Rahane and with the exception probably of Rohit, guys were averaging below 25. So with those mountainous run scorers being clipped to almost half of their productivity for a 2 or 3 year period in places where the most Test match cricket was played. So you got England who are going hell for leather, trying to finish matches as fast as possible.
And also before they couldn't buy a run.
And before then they couldn't buy a run. Yep. So all of the different run opening partnerships post Alistair Cook and all the rest of it. In Australia, for one reason or another, the mountains of the huge, first inning scores, the big sort of 500s. Bowl the team out. Do you want them to follow on? No, we'll score loads more runs again and still win the Test match. That sort of thing has gone out of the window.
I think we're really interested to watch this series because I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, but I think in England we have a different perception of what it's like to bat in Australia, because when England don't score many runs and Australia score millions.
Loads, yeah.
But actually, it's not just in Test cricket, it's in the Shield. But people might be raising their eyebrows at McSweeney being picked, averaging 37 in a different position. But he is actually scoring pretty much the most runs of anyone there. And there's chat that the ground staff are leaving more grass on the wicket in Australia.
Pitches have become more bowler friendly. You watch the Test match series in South Africa, for example. Now they play a lot less Test cricket now than they used to, and the 5-match series is almost a dodo, isn't it, down there now? But now they're playing on pitches where it goes all over the shop and matches are over very, very quickly. So you've got this combination of all kinds of things. Pitches, whether they be seam friendly or spin friendly, depending on where you are. You got batting lineups and teams playing with just built in more risk. Therefore, more wickets. Runs are being scored at a faster rate, but wickets are falling at faster rates as well. Matches being over within 3.5 days. But bowlers having a great time of it. Ben obviously, I think we'll probably talk to him in a minute about the piece that he wrote about this. Bowlers deliberately not trying to swing the ball, using the wobble seam, using the Kirtley and Courtney method of releasing the ball so that it slightly rotates rather than spins backwards, which means when it lands on the pitch it goes left and right, which is a hell of a lot more difficult to play than knowing someone's going to bowl an in-swing or an outswinger. All of these things got to jumble together to have made. Yeah, I mean, you would argue that Test match cricket has been a lot more fun to watch because of it. What I don't think, and what the headline is not, is that people aren't very good batters anymore, or that the bowlers have suddenly, have bucked a trend, a 30-year trend, and have found incredible new skills and ways, or more pace, or whatever it might be, in order to dominate the game. You got a combination of pitches, as always, batsman's attitude and a general attitude towards gaining more results and draws not being anywhere near as much as interesting in Test match cricket. You throw all those things together, and hey presto, the game is accelerating in ways that it's done ever since T20 started.
And I guess on the pitch as well, World Test Championship, big part of that. You're massively disincentivises the draw. You could be massive favourites for a home series, but if you win that 2-0 instead of 3-0, that could kill your chances. Ben, Butch mentioned your wobble seam piece. It's an epic. If people haven't read it, they got to go search it. We'll put it out on the socials afterwards. In it, you basically said this ball has potentially always existed, but in the last 15 years, bowlers are using it more and more, and they're not trying to swing it as much. And the theory is, it's obviously, if you've got good control over it, it's harder to play because you don't know. The bowler doesn't know which way it's going, so the batter's got no chance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's data. The data's all out there and all in the piece on this, that you can see that bowlers are swinging it less and seaming it more, and that looks like it's deliberate. And also the data shows that balls that seam more than a certain amount are much harder to play than balls that swing more than a certain amount. And that this thing has been, as Butch said, looks like Kirtley and Courtney were bowling it in the 90s, and it was kind of starting to be talked about as something that like some bowlers were doing a lot towards the end of the 2000s. The likes of Stuart Clark, Mohammed Asif, then Anderson uses it, goes to Australia, wins England and Ashes with it. Broad sort of develops
Vernon
it as well.
Philander.
Yeah, exactly. Vernon Philander, who I talked to for the piece actually. But I think the difference is that it's got, I think it's still a little bit talked about like this sometimes, where it's talked about as like maybe a variation for a fast bowler. They'll sort of swing it for a bit and then go like drop a wobble seam in here and there. Whereas actually, I think maybe for most fast bowlers, it is the primary method of attack. So Broad described himself by the end as a wobble seam bowler, not as a swing bowler. That's as a wobble seam bowler.
Learn and discover the away swinger.
Last year. Again, yeah. And I think you saw this happen in county cricket first. It was actually Daryl Mitchell, who now at the PCA, was opening for Worcestershire at the time. Who it was a feature in the magazine. We're talking generally about what are the issues with county cricket and what's going on with the standards of batting county cricket. And he said like, look, there's a lot of this is true, but like bowlers just bowling differently now. Like it's wobble seam the whole time, and it is so much harder to play. And I was like, oh, okay, that's not hard to think about the wobble seam. But I was like, okay, that actually does sound like, it is that's what's happening. And then you actually look across the game. And even if you just go back and look at like certain iconic balls that have been bowled, like, you remember the Bumrah to Jennings one, where Jennings looked absolutely stupid, sort of leaving the one that comes back in lows. But then you slow it down and it's wobble seam, and you look at how much it seamed, and it's like, well, he looks silly, but that's pretty unplayable. So yeah, it's definitely having I think it's having an impact, and I think the game has changed a bit, and the piece goes into as well of like why this is sort of why it kind of has taken hold now, when before it was maybe like bowlers here and there, rather than sort of like the dominant thing. But yeah, I think it looks like that has had an impact. I think
so. Someone like Cummins basically exclusively bowls it. For example.
I mean, also you've also got the left-handers thing, the weapon that bowlers have against lefties now with round the wicket and. Moving the ball away from them off the pitch. It's just it's not much fun that when in the past there were a couple of people who could do it. You think about the massive furore about Wasim Akram being able to bowl left arm around the wicket and move it away from a right-hander. That being just extraordinary. No one had ever seen that sort of skill before. But now you kind of line up, and pretty much every seam bowler in the world, if they can't do it, they're trying to learn how to do it. Has got that weapon against left-handed batters now, which makes life a damn sight more difficult. Because back in the old days, if particularly in places like Australia, you really needed to be able to swing it back, because otherwise you couldn't pitch it on and get people out LBW. And so you needed to have a ball that went that way. And now if the balls aren't swinging for whatever reason, it becomes very, very difficult.
I was going to ask you a technical question. I remember interviewing Alex Lees just before he made his Test debut in the Caribbean a couple of years ago. And he did it, it's a little bit in Test cricket. We did it a lot in county cricket before he got the call up. When he was facing right arm seamers from around the wicket, he would bat way across his stumps, showing all of leg stump upon release. And his theory was, you just get done LBW if you're batting normally from seamers around the wicket, wobble seaming it, because they're just attacking your front pad. And the theory was just get out the line. If you were playing in this era with more bowlers bowling around the wicket, looking to seam the ball more than swing, how would you have adapted your technique?
Well, I remember 2001 Ashes, Gillespie would bowl around the wicket to me, not predominantly, but would go there quite a lot if he wasn't getting any joy over. And I figured after him, I remember him doing it for a couple of overs at Lords, and I could not lay a bat on it. Just simply couldn't lay a bat on it. So I just went, I got that far outside my crease. Meaning that the similar length, he would have to bowl it that little bit shorter, and the similar length that he was bowling that I couldn't lay a bat on would always be going over the stumps, because where he was having to pitch it, now that I was that much closer to it, would be that much shorter. And so what I felt as though I had was the insurance of knowing that at a certain length, even if the ball was going to be tight to the stumps, it was going to go over. And so you could leave it on line and therefore force him to pitch it up a little bit further, and then suddenly you'd found the middle of the bat rather than it going past the stickers. And that was what I decided to do. And it was Dizzy didn't bowl massive amount of bounces. He was always looking to get the ball up there. But even then, if people are going to go short enough to try and hit you in the head, then you just you get out of the way of it, or you take it on, as they would do now. But that was the theory was a ball that in my normal stance would be passing the shoulder of the bat, and you're also thinking it could also hit the top of off stump. You then go a little bit further forward, he's either bowling you half volleys or he's gone that little bit shorter, and then you know that it's going to go over the top. And that was the theory.